In this episode with Manuel Nunes, we find out a bit more about his story with Roboyo from its early days. He gives us an insight into the importance of building a talent hub within a growing organisation and how cultivating a strong culture is a key pillar for success. Along with sharing some brilliant stories from over the years, we discuss some of the biggest trends in intelligent automation and where we see Roboyo going in the future. I hope you all enjoy. Hello everyone and welcome back to another episode here at All Access Automation. I'm delighted to be joined by Manuel Nunes, who is the Director of Transformation and Strategy at Roboyo. Welcome to the podcast.
Nice to see you.
Great to have you on. We are in beautiful Barcelona this morning at the Here Comes the Sound studio. Yeah. And yeah, I believe that you've had some experience here before.
Yeah. It's very lucky that you chose the studio where I had some DJ classes in the past.
Very good. Very good. Yeah. So we know that it's great quality, and we're looking forward to getting into it today. We have plenty to unpack. You've been here basically since the start of Roboyo. I think everyone's really looking forward to hearing about your own story and the development that the company have had since you've been here. And we're also going to dive into around the talent hub within Roboyo. So really looking forward to it. But you've been busy with a couple of events recently with Roboyo.
Yeah, I think May is always like the peak period of events, like pre-summer.
Yeah.
So I even lost count of all the trips that I've been doing, but I was twice in Madrid recently for a private event that we are doing as part of the All Eyes on Automation tour, which is kind of aiming at promoting our main event that we'll do also here in Barcelona in September. I did the session also for the same tour in Lisbon. Right, so I got the Iberian combo, and then we've also been participating in a couple of, let's say, events that are not really let's say designed by us as kind of a sponsor, where we got kind of keynotes and so on. Yeah, so it's been pretty busy.
Very good. And you had a nice location for the one in Lisbon, I believe.
Yeah, I mean we did the whole event in the Benfica Stadium.
Really cool.
And as a Benfica fan, that was pretty nice because I haven't been there for a really long time since I moved away from Portugal. So that was a blast.
Brilliant. Did you have any say in organizing that, maybe? Or?
Well, I might have dropped the suggestion,
okay,
but
nice.
Marketing then did the work.
Of course. Very good. So before we kind of go into it, just give me a bit of background about yourself and your own interests and your own journey, I suppose.
Yeah, cool. I mean, I have a very similar background to yours, right? So I kind of started studying a topic that was actually very far away from technology. I was studying business administration. Yeah. I had actually a bachelor in economics, and I think even if I look at how I spend my private time, like the books I read and so on, macroeconomics is still like a very big passion of mine. Like I kind of had this, let's say, technology, let's say, passion running a little bit in parallel with my studies. So it was kind of a detour I did to start working in intelligent automation, and I did it partially as an accident, and partially also because the masters I was actually doing, which is the CEMS masters that you also did yourself, basically required that we did a business project with a company in order to graduate. And you had a bunch of topics you could select from and so on. And one of the topics was a feasibility study on robotic process automation with Citibank. Okay. Right? I was living in Poland at the time, and I didn't really know what it meant, but the word robot was there. Yeah. I thought it was pretty cool. Yeah. So I actually applied for that one. I got it. And then I kind of got my first, let's say, exposure to the whole theme of intelligent automation from a business lenses, right? So we were kind of doing essentially a market comparison of the technologies that existed at the time, which are still the ones that we work a lot to this day, right? It's still UiPath, still Blue Prism, WorkFusion at the time, also Automation Anywhere. So we got kind of, let's say, out of the way a market, let's say, comparison that we provided to Citibank. And then we were also asked to do essentially a diagnosis, which is also so similar, to the stuff that we still do today, of going into the business and talking to people, identifying use cases that potentially could be used for automation. and that's where essentially the whole journey started for me. Now at the time I didn't know that I was gonna like work in the field, right? So I was kind of trying to figure out what to do after my master's, and I was doing a lot of, let's say, applications for more generalistic consulting, right? So I wanted to do consulting because I wanted to actually experience different industries, different customers, and so on. But in parallel to the process of applying to more generalistic, let's say, management consulting, I kind of had the robotic process automation topic in my head, right? So what I did was I went, at the time, the Blue Prism was really kind of the market leader, right? Okay. So even in terms of presence in Europe, it was quite different. Maybe a biased analysis that we did at the time, I don't know. But just the sheer amount of, let's say, research that was available on Blue Prism created this kind of, let's say, intention from my side to work in Blue Prism.
Okay.
And I started looking for positions in Blue Prism, and they were super like hardcore tech positions, right? 20 years software development and so on, which was not my profile. So what I did was I went to the partner list on the Blue Prism website, and I applied for all of them. All of them.
Yeah.
Like,
fresh graduate, straight
cover letter. I'm passionate about robotic process automation. I actually have a little experience, and nobody replied.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
One person replied, which ended up being my first boss.
Brilliant.
From a company in Czech Republic called Niobs. And he basically, even on the website, there was not a career page. There was just his email and his introduction.
Yeah.
And he replied, thanks for your interest. We're actually based in Prague. If you want to come here next week, just come.
Yeah. You packed the bags.
I bought a ticket, Polski bus, like the Flixbus of the time. Took a night bus to Prague the week after. Remember arriving there super early, went to the office to meet the team, and day one, they took me to a customer.
Wow.
Right? They had a customer that they had a pretty decent relationship with.
Yeah.
They asked whether they could bring like a potential new hire for me to see how the whole thing.
So you hadn't even been hired yet. This is
nothing. Just like first encounter.
Right.
And they took me there.
Yeah.
I sat next to Blue Prism developers that were modeling processes, like they were explaining me what they were doing, what was the work, and then that day after we did kind of, let's say, like the day at the customer, basically they challenged me to we installed you the foundation essentially training of Blue Prism throughout the summer. You give it a go. If you like it, you then can join us in September. So that was my first process of essentially getting my first job out of uni.
Amazing.
I ended up accepting, and then I was actually 2 years there before I joined Roboyo.
Brilliant. I love that story. That's great. Thrown straight into the deep end.
Brilliant. Very random.
It's always the best way. The best way. So you spend a couple of years there, you're kind of honing the skills, you're really interested in it. How does Roboyo come into this?
Yeah. I mean, I met Nick, right, one of our founders, through LinkedIn, right? And one of the things that came to mind during the interactions was one that he was coming from the same masters that we come. So I thought I was kind of, let's say, one of the people
outlier.
An outlier, right? That I did a detour into tech.
Yeah.
And then for me, it was very kind of appealing to have a person with the same background, right? So I got interested in the whole, let's say, invitation to talk more and know more about Roboyo, primarily because of that. And then the team actually invited me to come to Nuremberg. Right, and I went to Nuremberg to meet the founders, and I was just kind of, let's say, hooked immediately by the level of ambition, right? Right. So here were 3 founders that had a relatively small company, right? So you mentioned in the beginning that I joined from the start, but actually they had like already 2 years before I joined, but they were about 20-30 people, and they were telling me that they want to be the number one independent services provided for, at the time we didn't call it hyper automation, intelligent automation. And I thought that was super ambitious, right? So I wanted to be part of the journey. So essentially 2 months later, here I was. And that's always been one of the things that I thought was pretty cool throughout this whole time about Roboyo is that, we had a lot of a big journey, right? And we still are on that journey. But essentially, the focus of this goal, right, has stayed very relatively, let's say, the same. And I think that's pretty cool because you kind of had always a guidance, and in the bad days you remember that, in the good days you also remember that. So that was pretty cool.
And I suppose joining when there's about 20, 30 people to how it is now, what's that journey like, and why? You mentioned that the goal is always there in terms of what Roboyo want to achieve, but why is it that you wanted to stay with Roboyo, and why is it such a, I suppose, a home for you at this stage?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question, and I'm asked a lot that, especially now during interview processes, right?
Yeah.
I'm trying to tell a little bit the story to new potential staff, and they are asking me, why did you stay so long?
Yeah.
I think for me it's been maybe a, let's say, crossroads of three things, right? So I specialized very early on my career, right, which might have been a risk, but in intelligent automation, because the field is growing so much, actually I think it played in my advantage. But I wanted, because I had that specialization early on, I wanted to be in a company that is actually setting the tone of the market, right? And I see Roboyo as kind of, let's say, that company, right? We are pretty good in the stuff that everyone does, but we are always trying to also kind of innovate with new services and so on. So that is one bubble. Then the second bubble that I wanted to also kind of bring in my, I guess, portfolio of skills was being in a place where I could be entrepreneurial, right? So also like making sure that my work was actually shaping like part of the company and moving it forward. And because when you join a small company that has the ambition of growing, there's a lot to do. I think that bubble was also checked. And then the third bubble, which I didn't know at the time, but actually it turned out also pretty good, was that I wanted to be in the Champions League of the projects we do, right? Working with the best brands, with the most challenging, let's say, programs and topics.
Yeah.
And I think because those three bubbles kind of intersected at Roboyo, I was always kind of like very, very passionate, and I still am to continue the journey. And I think if you also look at those three bubbles, they're also not something that is finite, right? They don't finish. It's like you like there's a lot of years still to the story.
Constantly developing it as well. Yeah, very good. And you mentioned that you kind of started off in Nuremberg. How did that transition to your role now as director of in Spain and Iberia in general?
I mean, that was a move that I actually proactively asked the company to do, right? So I was based in Nuremberg, and I had one big challenge, which was I didn't speak German, right? So one of the I felt it was always, let's say, a limitation to connect with customers. Also on the personal side, I ended up kind of, let's say, being on the road, a disproportionate amount of time.
Where did you go?
I mean, I was a bunch in the UK.
Okay.
I was also a bunch in Portugal.
Yeah.
And even in Germany, in Germany, the country is also quite big, so you end up traveling a lot.
Yeah.
But I was mostly doing clients that had kind of global programs and wanted to do them in English. And at the time when I asked the transition, the office in Spain was still kind of starting, right? Getting the first customers and so on. So I also thought that there was a very cool opportunity in Spain to actually go further, and so I made the move.
Yeah, and we've recently kind of moved into Portugal as well with a new acquisition. So that's great that your home country's on the map now as well. So if we kind of just move into around the talent hub and what we wanted to discuss as well today, you kind of see two strands within this. You have the talent management of the people that are currently in Roboyo, and then we have the other strand of talent acquisition. Do you want to kind of just talk around that topic, I suppose, and the importance of it?
Yeah, maybe I start by defining talent hub, right? How do we see it in the company, right? So I think a talent hub for us is essentially an office, like the one we have here in Spain and in Portugal, that has a dual role, right? As the role of serving like our customers globally, right? And then there's a local ambition, right? Also of going after the local projects, participating in the local market and so on. And we call it on purpose talent hub and not a delivery hub, as usually it's positioned kind of in the market, because it's all about talent, right? So you want to have kind of a group of experts that bring to the table like the maximum quality you can actually do, right? So customers actually want to be part and then to work with our office.
Yeah.
And that obviously has a lot of implications on the talent acquisition process and on the talent management, right? So on the talent acquisition side, this is really about being out there in the market and convincing, the best possible talent to join us, right? And I think when we do this, there's a lot of stuff that we actually need to teach also our people that participate in the process of interviewing, of reaching out to potential contacts, that we always need to, let's say, take our ego off the picture and try to bring people that are better than us, right? So we all kind of learn from these new, let's say, members of our staff, and we all continuously keep growing, right? And I think we do this work, obviously, in great partnership with our talent acquisition team, right? That is kind of very active in trying to find, let's say, candidates for us. But really, I think the primary mission is making sure that we bring people that lift the bar of quality continuously. Right, and then not being afraid. Oh, I'm gonna get a new person joining, and it's gonna challenge me. No, it's
healthy competition as well. Yeah,
I wouldn't call it competition. It's really kind of working as a team to kind of get better, right, and being comfortable, right. For example, when you become a line manager, it's uncomfortable that suddenly you have reportees that know more than you on a specific topic, right? But that's your ego talking to you. Right, it's not really, let's say, a situation that is bad, right? So I think that's a little bit essentially the process on the talent acquisition side. And then when you do that, right, and I spend like also a great portion of my time on the other side, which is the talent management, right? Really making sure that people are engaged within the company, that they have the opportunities to succeed, that you kind of continuously have feedback flowing so people get better, right? So I think if I look now at the amount of initiatives that I'm doing, the internal ones, a great deal of them are on the talent management side, right? Just to mention a couple of them, like so this year we've piloted an approach here in Spain, which was giving every staff on the delivery side, so everyone that does projects, being a developer or a more traditional consultant business analyst, the opportunity to draft their goals for the year, and have like an audience with the region leadership to pitch their goals, so they get guidance, right, proactively, right, as opposed to getting to a performance review and people were focusing on an area that perhaps didn't bring as much value for them, for Roboyo, for the customers, right? This also allowed us to kind of balance a little bit, let's say, the amount of enablement that we do, right? So it's very often that when we get a new technology, that being such a technology-driven company, that everyone wants to enable in that direction. But also from a sustainability of having a hub that has a lot of different skills, it's obviously better to have kind of pockets and different teams that can support each other, and then we have actually the right level of maturity on the different technologies and services to then support clients globally, also locally, and so on. So that is one example. I think you've also been exposed to the graduate program that we're designing now, right? So creating, let's say, a structured onboarding approach that younger staff that joins now mostly from university can actually get a learning path that is more assisted, right? And trying to minimize also that there's a lot of friction on the learning in the first months, which in a technical area like ours always happens.
Yeah, very good. You mentioned trying to make sure that all your resources aren't in one technology. How do you manage that, I suppose, internally, and organize it where we have a good proportion of talent across all the different technology stack that we have?
Yeah. Good question. So I'm a big believer of being market driven, right? So there's a demand component to it, right? That doesn't start only with me. We have a team, but we the people that are advising also and cascading down priorities in terms of enablement, they must be very close to also the pipeline of projects that we are now essentially acquiring, right? Because essentially, if you enable a lot in vacuum, meaning that you do a lot of, let's say, e-learnings or a lot of, let's say, trainings, but you don't have the opportunity to put them in action, that knowledge eventually fades out, right? So I think it's very important to essentially have a market view on the whole thing. Obviously, then there's like a chicken and egg problem, which is if you're completely only driven by what you're scoping at the moment, you might also lose a little bit of, let's say, the market trends, right? So at some point, right, if you believe that there's a market trend, and specifically in our case, that want also to shape some of this like thinking in our kind of, let's say, intelligent automation ecosystem, we also sometimes need to do bets, right? We need to place a bet where, okay, we believe that we can actually, let's say, in this particular service, design something that is appealing for customers. And then we kind of also get a core team around the topic and we get it moving, right? But I think it's a combination of those two, let's say on the enablement view for the company. Right, and then I also like to bring an aspect of the people's preferences to the mix, right? Because I believe that people should also try to enable in areas that they're actually going to have fun when they come to work, right? So if I just tell you to enable in a particular technology because it's like good for Roboyo, but for you, you're not passionate about it, I think that there's a, let's say, a bottleneck there at some point. It's short-term thinking, right? So, I mean, you're a good example of this, right? So you joined us, I think, August, right? As a full-time employee. And at the time, we were kind of, we had a couple of months where you didn't have a project, right? So we told you, like, okay, understand an area that you would be passionate about, build your brand, and go for it, right? And you somehow, like saw the trend of conversational AI before it came now with ChatGPT. You took the time, you enabled, you kind of supported people that were actually driving the topic forward. And now you have a brand that people rope you in for this type of projects because you put in the work, right? So I think it's a combination of a lot of different things. But the idea is that enablement is not static, right? You need to kind of have a lot of these elastics pulling you in different directions and kind of make sure that stuff is not all enabled in the same direction. And it's not getting easy also for me because there's more technologies, more trainings to do, right? So it's
more people in general,
more
I
people,
suppose.
right? It's a balance, right? But it's the cool part of the people side of things, right? Which is really because everyone likes enablement, right? So you get a level of excitement that you don't get, for example, on a performance review.
No, I think it's a great point, and by you saying that it's not an exact science is so true. There's so many different factors that play into it. We'll discuss a few of the market trends later on, but that plays a part, the people's interest, like you said, and also the actual demand that we have as well for projects. So, no, very good. If we switch it now to the talent acquisition side of things, the graduate program that you mentioned, you were working with students similar to yourself back in the day, similar to me, where you have a business project, you're helping to kind of develop this. What are you kind of looking, I suppose, for this, and what's the goal of once these new graduates are on board, what's their journey like within Roboyo?
Yeah, so the goal of the graduate program, I think there's several goals. There's a macro goal of let's say attracting talent, right? But then there's also like sub goals of this, right? So one of the goals, I think, it's making sure that your onboarding is more structured, right? So I think it's one of the pains of growing so fast as we've been doing, that the onboarding as we had it like up to date might have been a little bit checklist based, right? So you get you get a body, you get a structure to it, like a 30-day, a 60-day, and a 90-day, but it's kind of designed to settle you in the company. And there's an important component which is also the knowledge, right? Giving you the knowledge to actually then perform at the level that like we want and that people also want for themselves. So that's one goal, right? The second goal is also, making sure that in terms of talent profile, we actually are attracting kind of people from the coolest backgrounds, the best schools, like people that by default like this kind of global environments like we have, right? We're
Very
pretty
international.
international company, right?
Yeah.
And if you are not that style of person, might be a little bit shocking, right? So English is the English that all the materials are done at, right? So here in Barcelona we have, I don't know, like 40 nationalities, right? So it's
Easily.
pretty wild.
Yeah.
And so that kind of filtering, it's also a big component. And then I guess the third one is like instill a level of culture on people from day one, right? That we are here to help them, that like the company is willing to invest in these kind of formats to also make life easier for you as an employee and give you the platform then to bring the level of ownership and go for it, right? So we designed the program to actually have 3 phases, right? So the first phase is really, let's say, a little bit kind of the basics of onboarding. So getting to know physically, going to Nuremberg, our headquarters, getting sessions from that span from strategy of the company and history of the company all the way to getting a session with the academy to know what the academy does,
course,
doing
yeah.
a session with managed services. So getting the full 360 view of the company, right? Who does what, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Then you start with the 3 months, which I think it's at least the parts we took the most care on designing, and I also think the more important, which is 3 months learning path, where you have a mix of e-learnings, you have a mix of like certifications you do, a mix of on-site visits where you are rotating different Roboyo offices
Yeah.
in order to kind of do a preparation that allows you then from month 4 and a half
Yeah.
to actually be ready to start onboarding customer projects, right? So we then look for customer projects that have kind of a larger team, so people can embed and still kind of feed off learning from colleagues, from customers, and so on. So the whole idea is to have kind of a structured onboarding that makes life easier, right?
Yeah.
So I mean, you can remember your onboarding.
Yeah.
For sure, it was less structured than this, and I can definitely remember my onboarding that there was
Can
no
imagine.
structure, right?
Yeah.
So that's the whole goal. It's making it kind of easier for new hires.
You mentioned the word culture there, trying to, I suppose, bring the graduates into a space where they feel welcome, where they feel that they can grow personally and improve in different areas. We've grown a lot, even since I joined last year. How do you kind of, I suppose, cultivate that culture, continue that it's spread across the company, and I suppose integration in general with new acquisitions and continuing with the One Roboyo? How has that been? Has it been a challenge? You've enjoyed it, obviously, but just talk me a bit about how that happens.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't get easier.
No.
Like it doesn't get easy.
Yeah.
I think culture is a tough one, right? And first, I think it's a tough one to define it, and then it's also a tough one to understand what to do.
Of course.
To actually make sure it stays at the level you want to, right? So at least the way I think about it, and definitely not my thought, but like I read a book from Ben Horowitz.
Yeah.
And he has this kind of like module, which is you have a square, which is culture as you define it on the page, right? On your website.
I feel like
your
I've seen this
values
before.
and so
Yeah.
on, right? And then you did. We did a workshop on this.
Yeah.
And then you have let's say the larger box outside of that small box, and that box is your actual culture, right? And the difference. The delta between the first box and the second box are the behaviors, right? So you want to, let's say, incentivize behaviors that leave your culture and also be, let's say, ruthless and also be kind of always trying to weeding out behaviors that are completely far away from you live, what you state is your culture, right? Yeah. And the level of tolerance you give to those quote unquote bad behaviors will actually dictate your culture in the end, right? And I think, I mean, I'm a believer of leading by example, right? So you should not ask somebody to do something that you are not doing yourself,
yeah.
right? And actually, if everyone that has reportees is actually having this kind of let's say thinking, then
Yeah.
it becomes quite easy to cascade down, how to think,
Yeah.
how to behave, and all that kind of stuff. And this is not to say as well that there's no space for being you, right? But there's like a certain level of behaviors that we expect, right? And it might be that if you don't agree with them, then it might be not the right place for the person, right? But I think
Yeah.
that's one way that you actually can maintain culture that is appealing, that is inclusive, that people can, be entrepreneurial and all that stuff.
Yeah.
And so that's a little bit how I think about it. But it's a hard one, and
Yeah.
and it's hard to quantify, right? If you're actually doing a good job. So you're always trying to tweak stuff.
Yeah.
Like try this, okay, didn't work, do that, asking people for feedback, right? So you're not also deciding stuff in a vacuum.
Yeah.
But it's definitely a hard one. I think I'm at least very proud of the culture that we've built here in Barcelona, right? I think there's a lot of can-do attitude, optimism. Also, people are like really helping each other.
Yeah.
And I think it's because we kind of try to also see or make people see that that's important, right? And not being tolerant for behaviors that and unfortunately can create toxicity.
No, it is a tricky one, and I think as we continue to grow, it's something that we need to keep at the core as well. But it's a good job so far. So, you mentioned about the talent hub and the importance of it for us as Roboyo, but for our customers and in the delivery aspect, how important is it for them?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two answers to that question. So the first one is how let's say the importance for customers that work with the talent hub, right? I think our mission from a talent hub point of view is always quality, right? That's the number one mission, right? Beyond any, let's say, KPI that you might have, you need to keep the quality high, because then, let's say, you deliver more value for your customers. You kind of like are a sparring partner for your customers when you are on projects and so on. So that's kind of the importance I see, right? So nobody wants to work with the talent hub that doesn't bring that level of culture to the game,
Of course.
right? So I think that's the, let's say, one angle to answer the question. I think the other answer is, I think the same way that we've created our talent hub and we invested on skills, on people and so on, that's also, let's say, an important dimension for our customers when they are building their own teams, right? Their own, whether you call it a center of excellence or the digital services hub or just the automation team. Our customers go through a very similar journey in making intelligent automation an exciting topic for
them.
their staff as well, right? So I think from that perspective, and this is perhaps like something that you don't talk a lot, right? But when a customer is building like a program of automation, right? So people and skills, they definitely don't appear in that famous kind of, let's say, PowerPoint slide that you do a POV, and then you industrialize, and then you professionalize, and then you reach the point of AI, right? But actually underpinning like any journey, you have your stuff, right? Like if your lead developer leaves because, work is not exciting anymore, then your journey of actually delivering more value instead of being something like that starts to be actually these cycles of, honeymoon and then, disillusion. Okay, the topic is not interesting anymore, right? So I think you always need the same way that we are kind of trying to make it dynamic for our staff and in terms of learning and in terms of kind of ambition, I think customers need to do the same. And something I see very widespread across the market is that customers forgot to consider, let's say, the operations effort in the past, right? So there's kind of this vanity metric of, I'm automating a lot of use cases. And that what happens very often is that a developer that is loving the job because it's automating a lot ends up being stuck in a position where I'm now doing support only, right? And I'm talking now on developers, even from the customer side.
Yeah.
And the level, let's say, of excitement drops massively, right? And that
Yeah.
poses quite a risk in terms of programs, in terms of kind of, ambition to go on
To
after
talent
new
management again.
technologies, right?
Yeah, yeah.
So I think our own experience allows us now to have services like maturity assessments and stuff that we also advise
Exactly.
on people and skills to the customer, right? And I think that's why I think it's important in the end.
Yeah. And that's the advisory side of things, I suppose, where we're learning from our own experiences, which is great. So on the Talent Hub conversation and around kind of implementing that for clients and in delivery, have you had much experience in terms of actually bringing that into play in terms of, implementing it for people and innovation within a company?
Yeah, I mean, we had obviously a lot of kind of, let's say, cases where we build the full governance of teams and so on. But if I think about the topic talent, one of the big themes that we have now being asked is connected with, awareness, excitement. So how do you actually create, let's say, a culture of automation within an organization, right? And maybe I can tell you a cool story that was actually done within the UK. We actually did a project not too long ago that mimicked the Shark Tank TV show, right?
Wow,
And
okay.
so the whole idea of the project was, on one hand, kind of widespread the know-how of automation, create kind of awareness of this type of technology, so people don't have as much fear of the word automation as kind of sometimes if you don't know anything about it, it can happen. And on the flip side, we also wanted to create kind of, let's say, a backlog of cases to actually implement, right?
Yeah.
And so what we did was, through a series kind of, let's say, of ideations and kind of marketing initiatives to galvanize the topic, we created a campaign, right?
Okay,
where
yeah.
people could submit use cases, they could propose ideas and so on. And then the top cases were pre-selected. And then the submitters from each one of these cases got a Roboyo coach, right?
Okay.
And the coach actually essentially built together with the person from the customer the pitch deck.
Okay.
So the person could actually go
Very cool.
on one day to a panel of juries composed both by our leadership and the customer leadership and pitch the idea.
Brilliant,
right? So this is kind of the idea I have. I would try to tackle it with this technology and so on. And the commit also from the customer was that the top idea gets implemented.
Okay.
Right. So it was also not that, out of this type of project that you have a huge backlog. Now you have to do everything all at once. It was just that, okay, we want to create awareness and we commit that the top idea, we pursue it.
Yeah.
Right. And
it's
and
brilliant because it's a mindset shift as well for the company, where it's exciting, but it's going to be beneficial for them as well.
Yeah. And you can actually measure type of excitement by doing, let's say, questionnaires before the project, questionnaires after the project, with different kind of levels of technology understanding, or whether it is kind of just overall fear of the topic and so on. And you can actually measure,
track it,
if people are actually more leaning towards automation or actually now even more reluctant to do it, right? And I think it's again, this was a cool project because it's kind of a, let's say, an innovative format of doing it. But there's so many examples of now doing citizen development, botathons, like where you actually put the topic people at the heart of the whole kind of program. And I think it's a cool way to do it, because I mean, without talent, this type of engagements, they go nowhere basically.
Exactly. And it's interesting when you mentioned the kind of citizen development, I suppose, and the trainings, because the discussion we had with Malika on the podcast as well, talking about how you kind of build that within the company is so important, and empowering the people that you have and making them interested, it all ties together. So it's great to see that that what we learn within our own company we can implement as well for our clients. You mentioned before about certain trends that are coming in, and obviously from when you started Roboyo, you mentioned that we're very good at what everyone does, but we're also looking to strive and to push ahead and really at the cutting edge of technology. From your own perspective, what do you see as the next big thing, I suppose, are the capabilities that Roboyo will have over the next couple of years?
So I think in terms there's a couple of, let's say, thinking like schemes that everyone is using in the market, which if I look now at the type of RFPs that we get or the type of challenges that we're getting from customers, there's definitely a trend in that direction. And the first one is stopping to think about automation as kind of a project and more like a program, right? So it's something that I think we were already saying last year, 2 years ago, but now I even look at kind of, let's say, RFPs that come from customers, and this sentence is there, right? And that has a lot of, let's say, consequences in your own services, right? So you not only have to be extremely good at implementing software, implementing these tools on the technical side, but you need that layer of advisory to actually diagnose what are kind of the customer challenges, what do you recommend, and so on, right? And I think also, so I think from a service perspective, being able to be honest with yourself as a consultant, that you're not here to provide an answer, but you're here to actually ask the right questions, and kind of, this is a chess game where you make a move, then you see how the organization reacts, then you make a second move, and so on. I think that's the biggest kind of thinking in terms of our service portfolio, right? Having a pretty good advisory layer. Then I think also on the technology side, things are not getting easier, right? So we now have customers that started on BPM, customers that started on RPA, customers that started on process mining, and they're all converging into, like, let's say, an ecosystem of technologies, and they're asking you pretty challenging questions, right? So what is the best technology to use this use case, right? And you need to develop this point of view, right, on how are you going to advise also customers technically, right? Which is, you need a sound foundation on, let's say, on the theory of what these technologies are capable to do. How do they actually link between each other, but also how do they link with systems of records of the customers, and then advise them properly on that as well, right? And in the past you have one hammer and you attack every topic with one technology. As the space gets broader, I think that also needs to like, the thinking there also needs to get broader. And then maybe the third part, and which we've been, I know you already talked with Cam, and there's going to be an episode on Lean, and hopefully I didn't mess up now the order of the episodes, but
spoiler.
But also thinking about processes in a macro level is changing a lot, right? So I think when I started in intelligent automation, you were kind of trying to mimic user behavior, right? You understand what the user does, and then you mimic it with technology in order to, alleviate the pain of the user, and also give the hours back to, let's say, to the business to do other tasks. I think the level of sophistication also on the process part is changing a lot, right? Now you're expected to challenge processes, you're expected to optimize them, you're expected to, really quantify, whether you use process mining or kind of classical consulting techniques, to quantify the pain. And then maybe automation is the answer, but maybe not, right? I think that's what is changing. And a byproduct of that as well is that I see a lot of change in the way that business cases are being done, right? So 2 years ago, you would kind of go into let's say, a business unit, and you would essentially diagnose FTE potential, right? You would allocate the amount of hours that a process takes. You would kind of quantify that, and then, okay, here's my backlog for automation, just based on hours. Now, the problem with this exercise is that if a process is not done today, nobody does it because nobody has time to do it, but there's actually a huge, let's say, revenue potential, or you're avoiding some sort of payment that you need to do because you didn't meet the deadline and stuff like that. Those type of processes don't come up in when you're just
No.
allocating hours, right?
Yeah.
And so there's a level also of business case sophistication that I think I'm messing that word, but
I
that,
like it. I like that word.
Yeah, you like it. So the business case thinking
Yeah.
is also improving a lot, and this demands that your consultants also stay up to date with these trends, right? So I think that's what I see. It is becoming, I think, more interesting because customers already know the basics, right? So they want to work with you because you're
Exactly.
in depth in the theme. So I think we have an advantage there as well.
Yeah. And from you seeing it from a director level, seeing the trends that are coming from the customers, how do you relay that information down to us, for example, the consultants or the engineers, at a lower level, but actually being involved in the projects as well? How do you kind of get that message down to them?
So there's the dimension, and you've been also part of this of knowledge management and knowledge sharing that is pretty crucial, right? So we invest a lot in thunder talks, storm talks, like having let's say the owners of each one of the topic cascading methodologies, like prototyping them and centralizing them, so we can actually like make sure that knowledge navigates
throughout
the organization,
yeah.
which is definitely, I think, one of the hardest tasks we have ahead.
Yeah.
Right, because with growth,
the area
and also,
we're in,
it's one, exactly, one, it's not static. Two, we are growing.
Yeah.
Right. So there's that, and then it also, I think it also comes with having the right, let's say, meetings with, let's say, with the level of, let's say, cascading down, but also the other way around. Like a lot of the opinions I actually have, I'm like on a lot of the things that we talk now might actually be done in projects where I'm not directly involved, but I need always to
what's going on.
To keep an eye on that, right? I used to do a thing, and I still do it maybe a little bit with less regularity now, which is I was always opening all the proposals that we were answering, even from other countries, seeing like how are we positioning certain like services. I mean, there's the operational part that I was also looking for materials that I thought like fit also narratives in kind of like, let's say, scopings that I'm doing and stuff. But then also to see, to grasp a little bit what are actually customers looking for, right? And I think you can do this irrespective of being a director.
Of course.
I was doing it when I was a senior consultant, right? You can always do this, right? Because actually you shape it more than me at the moment, right? Because you're really kind of, doing the stuff, involved, right? Yeah. I don't want to give the impression that I'm not doing anymore. But way less, let's say, operational than before. And that's one of the challenges that I also feel this year, which is, how do I keep my game also on the edge, right? It's definitely not getting easier.
Yeah. Just on that, how have you found the transition? In general, you were very much involved early on in your career in delivery, and then now going into maybe a more business development role, more of a leadership role. Do you enjoy it from your own perspective?
Yeah, I mean, to be quite frank, I miss the getting my hands dirty. Yeah. I think there was always and like, for example, there's particular projects when we do new technologies that I want to be there. I want to see demos. I want to see the, let's say, the kind of the methodology that we are creating, right? For example, we're doing now a task mining project in a contact center, right? It's the first time I've done task mining in contact center, right? So I know the contact center processes. Yeah. But I want to see how comes now task mining into the mix of getting visibility on data. And because I thought that that actually this is an area of potential that customers will definitely seek, I want to be there and see it, right? I think like in any job, the challenge is managing a little bit, let's say, time with kind of being everywhere and stuff like that. So also, I think this connects to a thing I told you connected on with talent acquisition, which is being also comfortable that, for example, my repertoire is no more about a topic, and not having like any shame in, like Evelina, she's now doing like a lot of work with Appian, right? And I asked her, can you do me a 1 hour workshop, explain me how you do it, what's the methodology, because I also want to learn, right? And I have no problem to ask these two people.
That's the mindset you need, though, to continue to grow as a company.
I mean, if you like, I think in technology, right, our field moves fast, but technology as a whole moves so fast that if you don't like continuously try to seek a little bit like the new trends, but
it's
also
only you that will suffer from it.
Yeah, exactly. At some point, you're stuck with stuff that is outdated, and then you kind of lose your edge. And yes, sometimes you need to invest the time on top of the noise of the day, right? I mean, before coming here at 7 a.m., I was doing like the foundations training from Appian. I'm doing the Appian Business Analyst certification, right? I do it maybe before.
We love the commitment.
Quote unquote.
We love the commitment.
Work starts,
but
I think that's also what it takes to kind of stay on the edge in technology, right?
But it's also taking pride in your own work as well, where like, this is obviously good for the company, but it's good for you as well. And if it's a passion of yours, then if it's good for you, it's good for the company. It's a great combination. So
and I think this again goes back to your example, goes back to Roboyo being an entrepreneurial environment, right? So I think the people I see in the company that have kind of the biggest success and the biggest kind of also recognition, they build their own brand by going after some topics, right? That maybe they are a little bit, let's say, detached from what you're actually doing at the moment, but they kept on staying relevant, on building those skills, right? And they proposed ideas and they go after it, right? So you were on my team in August, and you came up with the idea of, why don't we do a podcast, right? What did we do? We shoot an email, we get kind of sponsorship on top.
Develop a plan.
A few months later, we are here actually doing it, right? So I think that's credit to you because you pursued it, right? But that also shows you that there's a space to actually go after the topics and so on. And the information is out there. It's also like for the person to kind of build those skills and then, like not staying comfortable, I guess. That's the word.
Touching words, man. Just to kind of wrap it up now, I mentioned it before about where you kind of see the technology going, I suppose, but your vision for Roboyo in general, I have to ask you, you've been here since not the start, but very close to the start, and you've seen it grow now to over 650 people. Where do you see it going, this rocket ship, as you like to call it?
Yeah. I mean, I think really in terms of really mission we have at the moment is consolidating a lot of the know-how that we have in the company on these 5 technology bubbles that we have, right? So I think we started, and it's no secret, on the robotic process automation field, and through acquisitions, partnerships, like organically hiring also a lot of talent. We now have conversational AI, low-code, BPM, intelligent document processing, and process mining, right? The big, like, let's say, mission now for us is we have kind of these pockets of expertise, and you have kind of different countries tilting in one direction or the other, is widespreading this know-how. That's kind of all of these trends that I was telling you before, they become, let's say, a widespread knowledge within the company, right? So I think that's really, I think, a little bit the mission that we have at the moment. And then I think more macro in terms of vision, I think it's easy to fall into the trap of thinking, we had an amazing journey and it's done. I think I always got the impression that we still have so much to do and so many challenges to overcome. So it's a little bit keeping in the same direction of growing, not for the sake of just growing, but continuously to kind of develop the company so we provide better services, we kind of get more interesting projects for our staff, and then we keep pushing a little bit the envelope on what's possible to do in intelligent automation, right? And I think in a way we're still scratching the surface of what's possible to do. And I think sometimes we talk with customers that have been doing it for a while, and it creates the illusion that, okay, like it's done, like automation is kind of now, completely
Realized,
embedded within the culture of a big organization. But is it really? I think no, there's still a lot to do there.
Definitely. Good stuff. Well, I think that's a great place to finish up. Manu, really appreciate your time. You can go back to your Appian training now. And thanks for welcoming me back to Barcelona with open hands and open arms. So, we'll wrap it up there. Thanks again for your time.
Cool.
Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.